2:57. 1400 hours, 57 minutes. 14:57. 2:57. Israel Standard Time. Daf Yomi. Tractate Makot or Makos, depending on your pronunciation. Page 3a. Makot Gimel Amud Aleph or Makos Gimel Amud Aleph. And top of the page with the words "My nihu delo asu maise hainu deraba ema vechen amar Rav Nachman." The Gemara is puzzled by this. What is the meaning of the statement, "The money remains in the possession of the owner"? It means that they did not perform an action. That is identical to the reasoning of Rabbah. And it's not an additional explanation. The Gemara amends the formulation of the presentation of the statement. Say, and likewise Rav Nachman said, know that it is so, as the money remains in the possession of the owner. Rav Nachman is not disagreeing with Rabbah, he merely formulates the statement differently. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Apropos the statement of Rabbi Akiva in the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says a conspiring witness pays according to his share. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Ed zomim mishalem lefi chelko. Mai mishalem lefi chelko. Ilim medahai mishalem palga. V'hai mishalem palga tanin mishalem mamon ve'ed mishalem Makos. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says a conspiring witness pays according to his share. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of pays according to his share? If we say that it means that this witness pays half of the sum that the set conspired to render another liable to pay with their testimony, and that witness pays the other half, we already learned this in the Mishnah, 5a. When punishing conspiring witnesses, one divides the punishment of money among them, but one does not divide the punishment of lashes among them. Each receives the full 39 lashes. Okay? And like going to eat tazum chalbinayu, dimishalem palgidideu, dimishalem behatanya, and ed zomem mishalem maman ad shiazum mushnehem. Rather, the Gemara explains that the expression pays according to his share means that in a case where only one of the set was rendered a conspiring witness, the halacha is that he pays his half of the sum. The Gemara asks, and does he pay at all in that case? But isn't it taught in a Braita a conspiring witness pays money only when both are rendered conspiring witnesses? If only one was rendered a conspiring witness, he does not pay. Amar Rava be'omer edus sheker he'adati kol k'minei kevan she'yeshuv eno chozro magid. Rava says the statement is not referring to a case of conspiring witnesses. Rather, Rav's statement applies to the case of one who says it was false testimony that I testified. The Gemara asks, is it in his power to have this statement accepted by the court? That runs counter to the principle. Once a witness stated his testimony, he may not then state a revision of that testimony. Keman delo Rabbi Akiva, de'ik Rabbi Akiva, ha'amar af eno mishalem al bi'atzmo. The Gemara answers rather, Rab's statement applies to the case of one who says we testified and were rendering conspiring witnesses in such and such a court. Since he was already convicted as a conspiring witness, it is as though he is admitting an obligation to give monetary restitution and he is therefore liable to pay his share. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is this halacha? It is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, since if it were in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, doesn't he state that a conspiring witness also does not pay based on his own admission? Ela be'omer yadu yusavul beitin ploni v'chiyav mamon. The Gemara answers, rather Rav's statement applies to the case of one who says, we testified and were rendered conspiring witnesses in such and such a court, and we were rendered liable to pay a specific sum of money. In that scenario, Rabbi Akiva would concede that one pays on the basis of his own admission. Once the court rendered him liable to pay a specific sum, his admission is not that he is liable to pay a fine, in which case he would be exempt. Once the court actually instructed them to pay, the debt has the status of any other monetary restitution, and one does pay monetary restitution based on his own admission. So the Gemara explains a novel element in Rav's statement. It might enter your mind to say, since he is unable to render his fellow witness liable to pay based on his admission, as only the testimony of two witnesses is capable of doing so, he too is not liable to pay based on that admission. To counter this, Rav teaches us that his admission that he owes money renders him liable to pay. And that concludes the Gemara on that. That concludes it, and we start with a new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Me'idin anu ish ploni shigerish es ishto velo nasan la ksuvata vehalo ben hayom uben machar sofer litena ksuvata. The Mishnah says, in the case of witnesses who said, we testify with regard to a man called so-and-so that he divorced his wife and did not give her payment of her marriage contract. And they were then rendered conspiring witnesses. The question arises with regard to the manner in which the sum of their payment is calculated. It is not possible to render the witnesses liable to pay the entire sum of the marriage contract, as they can claim. But isn't it so that either today or tomorrow, meaning at some point in the future, he may divorce his wife or die, and ultimately he will be liable to give her payment of her marriage contract? That being the case, witnesses did not require to render him liable to pay a sum at some point he will divorce his wife or die. Wait a minute, if you die, you're not giving, it's only divorce. If he dies, you don't give any ksuba. That's like saying at some point he has to give her no. Anyway, that being the case, witnesses do not require to render him liable to pay that sum that he would otherwise not be liable to pay. Is that the norm? Do normal people, does everyone divorce their wife? Anyway, Omdin Kama Adam Rotzlitem Ksuba Zo Shi'im Nis Almana or Nis Garasha Bimese Yershinabala. The sum of their payment is calculated as follows. The court assesses how much money another person would be willing to give in order to purchase the rights to this woman's marriage contract, cognizant of the uncertainty that if she was widowed or divorced, the purchaser will receive payment of the marriage contract, but if she dies, her husband will inherit from her, and the one who purchased her marriage contract will receive nothing. Okay, Gemara, the Talmud says, Ketzad Shamin. The Mishnah establishes that the payment of the conspiring witnesses is calculated based on this sum that one would be willing to pay for rights to payment of the marriage contract. Who buys people's marriage contracts? Taking into consideration the uncertainty whether he will ultimately receive that payment. The Gemara asks, how does the court assess that sum? Rav Chisda says one calculates the sum in terms of the husband. How much would one be willing to pay for the husband's rights to the marriage contract based on the likelihood that his wife will die first and he will inherit from her? What if they were poor? What if they were just, I don't know, had no money, were poor, had not a lot of money? I don't know. Rav Natan bar Oshaya Omer Beisha. Rav Natan bar Oshaya says one calculates the sum in terms of the wife. How much would one be willing to pay for the wife's rights to the marriage contract based on the likelihood that the husband will die first or divorce her? Omer of Papa Beisha Ubiksubata. Rav Papa says one calculates the sum in terms of the wife, as Rav Natan bar Oshia said, and the assessment is done in terms of the sum of her marriage contract. One does not include in the calculation any usufruct property that the wife brought with her into the marriage, the profits of which belong to the husband, despite the fact that as a result of the testimony of the conspiring witnesses, the husband would lose his rights to those profits. One calculates the sum only in terms of her marriage contract. That concludes the Gemara on that Mishnah. Next. New Mishnah. Me'idin on the Mishponi Shu Chayv L'Chaveiroi Elef Zuz Al Menash L'Yitein Lo Mikan V'yad Shloshim Yom V'hu Omer Mikan V'yad Asar Shanim. In the case of witnesses who said, we testify with regard to a man called so-and-so that he owes another person 1,000 dinars that he borrowed on the condition that he is to give the money back to him from now until 30 days have passed. And the borrower says that he borrowed that sum, but it was on the condition that he is to give the money back to him from now until 10 years have passed. And they were rendered conspiring witnesses. Here too, it is not possible to render the witnesses liable to pay the entire sum. Omrim kama adam rotzeh litein bi ubiando elef zuz beinos mikan ve'shloshim yom beinos mikan ve'esri shanim. Rather, the court estimates how much money a person would be willing to give so that he would keep a loan of 1,000 dinars in his possession, and one calculates the difference between that sum and the situation where he would be required to give the money back from now until 30 days have passed, and that same sum in the situation where he would be required to give the money back from now until 10 years have passed. That difference is the sum that the testimony of the conspiring witnesses sought to have the buyer lose. Therefore, it is the sum that they must pay. Okay, so they testified about a man who owed someone 1,000 dinars. He borrowed on the condition that he is to give the money back now that there's a past. The borrower says he borrowed this sum 10 years. And they're saying that. They're saying that the borrower said that. So they have to pay that difference, yeah. Okay, of how much money would have been paid to extend the loan from 1 to 3 days to 10 years. Okay. Got it. That was the Mishnah. Okay. Gemara. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel Hamal V'Eskabeir L'Eser Shanim Shvit Mishamto. Yehuda says that Shmuel says in the case of one who lends money to another for a period of 10 years, a sabbatical year abrogates the debt. See Deuteronomy 15, 1-11. And absolves the borrower of the obligation to repay it.